Hey, good afternoon.
Guess I was me there. Good afternoon. How are you doing, Mike?
Be happier if I was in New Jersey, but I'm fine.
That's sorry about your flight issues.
It is what it is. I mean, I didn't really realize, I guess, that as that storm kind of went past Bermuda, I guess it kind of went back toward the East Coast. So because it looked like significant flooding in Connecticut and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, the inbound flight was late. If we'd gotten out on time, we might have made the cut on the ground hold.
Yeah.
I guess we'd have just been circling in the air. So yeah, I think I appreciate you sending me the attendance numbers, but I am generally not happy given how dense New York, New Jersey is.
Mary. Ta-da. So, how are you
Hi,
doing?
Michael. Hey, Dylan.
Hello.
How are you doing today? Good. Cool. I'll let the rest of the people in the minute, or the members in a minute. But I want to make sure we are good to go. All right, let me do the teams. Let me do that room. Excellent.
Hi.
All right, Luann, can you hear me?
I see you. You see me?
I can see you. I can't really hear you though.
Really? Let me. Hello, welcome.
I can
We
hear
know that,
you.
man.
Okay.
Ken, can you talk?
There.
All right.
How are you? Help yourself to some
So much.
coffee and
Okay. There. That is the boy. Why not just a big table or? Doesn't look like it's overcrowded. I'll sit
There's
down.
only six of us.
Only six of you.
Everyone else is
I don't think the
virtual.
room is big enough.
Yeah. Glad we got the extra chairs moved in. No, I mean, mostly everyone is like.
You never go to this terminal thinking you're gonna get here exactly on time, because sometimes a little traffic in the port.
So we had a working session. Use this church. Okay, third floor.
In that,
So we just broke. Watching like
Ken, can you hear me? All right, you can, so that's good. All right, we will be starting in a few minutes. Ken, let me get this mic. Mike, can you hear me? Dun, dun, dun. All right, I want to go ahead and Ken, can we sort of get everyone in the room? We can go ahead and get started. Also, I've muted your mic, so you may need to unmute on your end.
Right.
There you go.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear
Yeah.
you. Can you get everyone sort of in the in person to sort of go ahead and we'll go ahead and get started?
Well, that's very easy, Dylan, because I'm the only person here.
Where?
The rest of our group is in transit. Or
Okay.
New York, little great goofy today, so
Do you know when they'll be there?
I would expect them in less than the next 10 minutes.
Okay, all right. So we will hold until the rest of the group gets in. So let's aim to start at 1:15. Apologies for the delay, everyone.
Yeah, I just got a note 5 minutes out, so by 1:15 we should be in good order.
All right, we will be ready
Sorry
to go at
about that.
1:15 then.
Fantastic. Highlight of my day.
Hey, Commissioner Bensel.
Dylan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
Good, good.
We are on a slight delay. There's a lot of folks in traffic, so probably we'll start around 1:15. So
Good, good, good. Thanks. That's no problem.
It'd be great to see. Thank you, baby. Welcome.
Are we it? Where is it?
Hi,
Well, this is it.
Are you serious?
See, Mark, or just me? I'm the public. That's
We are in logistics, right?
we are.
Yes, we are.
Hey,
This is the public.
are we supposed to be at that end or this end?
That end, closing to the camera.
Closest to the camera.
Lights are on.
All right.
Nice.
Bob's home. Mike's on camera.
Yeah, I'm done.
Mike, your
Nope,
Thor,
Not sitting there.
Lexus.
Go.
Hey,
I think we, lights are on, camera is on. I think Dylan is gonna start us up at 15 after.
oh, great.
Perfect. Give a little
Whoa.
buffer. There's coffee over there, water. Dylan, we are ready when you are, sir.
all right.
Yep.
Are
I'm just gonna use that. I don't need that.
y'all ready, or we can sort of? I did put in until about 1:15. So if you all want to sort of get coffee, use bathroom, whatever, go ahead and do that.
That's good.
Nice that you see the airport from here.
This is a great.
It is.
The password for the Wi-Fi is in the back.
The planes, trains, automobiles, pipelines.
Water, wings, and wheels.
Hey, Deb, where are you? Are you in Mar Terminals?
Yes.
Okay.
Need it closer for your eyes.
3 days in a row. Days in a row.
Wow,
Like the gold standard for me lately.
John Q. Public, eh?
I guess we can, Mike and Ken, are y'all good to go ahead and get started?
Yes.
All right, let me admit in everybody. All right, I'll go ahead and kick us off. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the National Shipper Advisory Committee. Take a few minutes at the start of today's meeting to discuss how the committee works, who they are, and what is going to happen this afternoon. So first of all, my name is Dylan Richmond. I work for the Federal Maritime Commission and serve as the designated federal officer for this committee. What that means is that I am the liaison between the committee and the agency. I implement the agency's charge as it comes to the committee and ensure that the committee abides by federal laws as they apply to advisory committees. I also assist with managing these meetings and sort of ensure that the committee sticks to their agenda. So who is the National Shipper Advisory Committee? They are a group charged by the United States Congress for advising the FMC on issues impacting the shipping public and the supply chain. They're composed of members representing importers and exporters from numerous industries and of various size. They raise up issues that they believe should be addressed by the Commission. And finally, committee members are selected by the commissioners, but operate independently of the Commission. Today's meeting, you'll see several members are at Mar Terminal. I will note Mar Terminal is not affiliated with the committee, nor did they have any input in today's discussions. But I would like to thank Mar Terminal for offering their facilities for the committee's use, and also to thank the NSAC's Vice Chair Ken O'Brien for arranging the logistics for today's meeting. Now on to the agenda for today. First up, the committee will hear from Commissioner Bensel and an update on the MTDI. Then they will hear from Commissioner Vekich. Following the commissioner presentations, the committee will hear from the Digital Container Shipping Association and ASTM. These are outside organizations who the committee has sort of provided working on topics of interest to the committee. Following those presentations, the NSAC will sort of discuss, provide updates of their subcommittees, which are, focused on topics of critical importance to shippers. Following the subcommittee updates, then there will be time for a public comment, and we'll touch on that later on. At this point in my remarks, I have a few housekeeping items. I know the NSAC has heard these many times, but the committee operates under the auspices of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Because of that, minutes of this meeting will be taken. Please also note that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the NSAC's website afterwards. For the members who are joining us virtually, please mute your mics if you're not speaking. And the only people who should be on camera for today's meeting are committee members and then presenters during their presentations. My final points, again, are for the committee before they launch into their discussions. Please be reminded that antitrust laws do apply to the members today. And also, please be reminded that committee members cannot speak for the committee, the Federal Maritime Commission, or the federal government and their roles as members outside of the committee structure. They may speak to their personal observations as to committee service and personal opinions on recommendations that the committee adopts. With all that said, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that there's a quorum of committee members present, and so the meeting can begin.
Thank you, Dylan. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you as we convene today. Let me begin with an appreciative thank you to MAR Terminal for hosting us really in an important part of the country, right? As we try to continue to work around the country to meet and be present with fellow shippers and other stakeholders in the work that NSAC is doing, it's important that we've got partners that allow us space to be able to have these meetings. And so definitely appreciate MAR Terminal for what they've done for us today. To my fellow members, great appreciation for your unwavering engagement and dedication, which are the keystones of the National Shipper Advisory Committee's mission to counsel the FMC on ways to enhance competitiveness, reliability, integrity, and fairness of our international ocean freight delivery system. In compliance with the Federal Advisory Committee Act, we've embraced transparency and openness, ensuring our work is accessible and accountable to all stakeholders. Through our streamlined public meetings like today, the website, and our intentional ongoing dialogue across the country with BCOs, their member organizations, and other stakeholders, we remain connected and responsive, fostering a community dedicated to promoting fair and innovative shipping practices. Thank you for your unwavering commitment and for ensuring our deliberations are grounded in practical realities. I'd like to extend also a heartfelt acknowledgement of our fellow shippers, freight intermediaries, and the resolute members of the trucking community who are joining us today. Your participation and engagement are crucial in our collective success. Your shared experiences provide the FMC with invaluable perspectives that enhance their understanding and approach to the complex dynamics we face each day. Your continuing efforts in navigating the logistical challenges of transport and delivery do not go unnoticed. They significantly contribute to the robustness of our supply chains and the U.S. economy overall. Together, we're not just addressing current issues, but also paving the way for a more resilient and efficient future with the U.S. leading the way. Under the direction of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, the Federal Maritime Commission has finalized the ALJ ruling on chassis choice, demurrage and detention, and most recently refusal to deal. All significant work and steps toward improved competitiveness, reliability, integrity, and fairness. Much has been done, and we all acknowledge there is more to do. As we move forward, let's build on this foundation of thoroughness and competitive and collaborative spirit. Your expertise and insights are invaluable as we continue to shape the shipping environment that is not only efficient, but also just and accessible. Thank you all for your unwavering commitment to this vital work, whether you're a member of the committee or joining us today or joined us in prior meetings. I eagerly look forward to our discussions today and to the impactful outcomes they will surely yield. Let's make a difference together. And I'll turn it over to Ken.
Thanks, Mike. Afternoon, everybody. Ken O'Brien, Vice Chair. A very quick thank you to MAR Terminal as well. A great room with a great view of all this commerce moving around. Thinking about our meeting today, we actually, a group of us actually met this morning here in the port at the SCI Center, looking at the gates of PNCT as well. And what it really, it grounds you in remembering that they're not just spreadsheets and emails, they're boxes and ships and trucks and trains. And it more grounded me to remember that the financial risk to our country, to our companies, we all face when it stops working. And what are we doing to fix that working? And we've talked about it in past meetings, but as I was listening this morning, I was optimistic and yet realized the task at hand that is far from complete. And I think really what it really gets down to, what we were talking about really, is the data is the underlying problem or opportunity if you're an optimist. And that really this interconnected business that we're all in, impacted by potential labor strike, a strike in Canada, the Red Sea, India, Bangladesh. You can go, the list goes on indefinitely. And so this idea that this was formed on the back of COVID, well, it appears to me at least that all of these external factors aren't stopping anytime soon, and that the only way to actually find our way to keep supply chains fluid is that if we can exchange information and at least understand where the problems are popping up. And I think today, looking at the agenda, when you really look at it, almost everything on it falls back on data. And so I think we really need to see if we can make strides, help the commission to find that path. And maybe even other parts of the federal government that have, resources and the ability to help us to stitch this disparate data sources together, and hopefully make supply chains more resilient as we go forward. Look forward to a great discussion, and thank you very much.
All right. So Commissioner Bensel, you are up first on today's agenda. Turn over to you.
Thanks, Dylan. It's nice to see everyone on the screen there. And actually, for those of you that are at the MAR terminals, you're probably sitting right at the commencement of one of the most valuable pieces of logistics real estate in the United States. You've got the seaport of Port of New York, New Jersey, which is either one or two, depending on the month in the United States. You've got the Northeast Corridor, which is the majority of our rail transport, both in terms of passengers and freight, and you have the I-95 highway corridor, which is probably the most heavily traveled highway corridor in the United States. So it's really, and it all goes across in about a 2 or 3 mile radius, coming right to the port and harbor of New York. So it really is a spectacular place to hold your meeting. And I echo the comments about MAR terminals making their place available to you. And I think Ken hit it on the nail on the head when he talked about data and the ability to use information to be more efficient, because transport, especially maritime intermodal transport, which is our supply chain. It really is, for the most part, most of the commodities that go into the system of retail and manufacturing at some point has a connectivity with international shipments. Is reliant on a system of information that's inadequate to what it sustains, and so we need to do better with that. And so, really happy that the NSAC is focusing on that. I am planning to work with the advisory committee as I go forward with the Maritime Transportation Data Initiative. I'd like to do some more things with you as we get closer to finalizing a report. So I've been talking to Mike and to Gabe Rodriguez about how we could do this. So I think we'll have some further discussions on how to talk about what I hope to be a final set of recommendations on maritime transportation data that would be completed early this fall. Sort of wanted to give you an update on where things stand right now, the focus areas, and then I'll turn it back over, I guess, back to Dylan and or for questions. Am I supposed to answer questions after this, Dylan? So
up to you, Commissioner.
Okay, well, we can do any questions we want. So, but anyways, the data initiative is been being worked on for the past 3 years. It was created after Chairman Maffei assigned me the responsibility of setting up an initiative to consider the quality of data and to come up with recommendations on potential standards for data dissemination and a way of describing the lexicon and harmonizing a lexicon that could be used in aligning the transportation data system. And so pursuant to that, we did 80 meetings, all of them like this online, and they're available on the FMC website. And so people can go back and historically evaluate the comments that have been made. We met with almost every industry during that process, shippers, carriers, BCOs, terminals, NVOCCs, maritime labor, longshoremen, trucking interests. And so I think we really have a good database of commentary on on the challenge of relying on the information that we get today and recommendations on what needs to occur to make the system better. And so we asked the same questions of all participants, and we focused on the people that were in the business of doing shipping, the IT folks that looked at the assessments, and the operations folks that dealt with the quality of information. And we asked them, what sort of information do you have? What sort of information would you like to receive? Is there differences between imports and exports? And how do you receive your data? What's the format? And so we have a lot of good data on that. And as a result of those comments and a working session that we did, I put forth my first draft set of recommendations. And we have to date put out two set of comments, questions for the public to consider. I am working on a third set of questions for public review. The first two were more macro issues, and the last one that will be I'm working on with staff right now is getting into the specific recommendations in detail, and also considering some of these ancillary, outside of the scope issues that need to be considered in the context of any recommendations. These are security issues, cybersecurity issues, smart container implementation, and issues not directly related to the recommendations themselves that need to be considered by the public as we move forward. So I anticipate that we will be issuing something shortly, and so I wanted to talk to your group and give you an update about that. My intent is to get further commentary after I issue a final report with recommendations, and so, what I'm looking at now is the end product verification, assessment of the comments. Staff is working on all of the comments that have been provided to us, and I hope to have a summary of those as part of the report, and the last set of questions culminating in a final report. And I would like to work with you. I talked to Mike just recently about this, as that final report is being done, as something that maybe we could consider through the NSAC process as well. I wanted to talk about the focus areas that I'm really looking at. Driving principle is really the quality of data that is received is inadequate. Technology is adequate provided that the underlying data is better. And I was talking to a company that's in the business of providing scheduling information about transits to all companies throughout the United States and throughout the world. And they were explaining that there was a continuing lack of stability in that data. It is not being publicly produced in any fashion that can be used effectively. And so we're looking at specific areas in terms of the intermodal supply chain as we look at the questions and the final recommendations. They include schedule reliability. I would like to see a system of schedule reliability for ocean shipping. Right now, information is not updated. It does not reflect cancellations, blank sailings, issues related to services. But how can you plan what you want to do with respect to your businesses if you do not have any visibility at least 5 months in advance? If I want to buy a ticket to Disneyland 5 months from now, I can know basically when my plane would land and plan accordingly in terms of reservations and hotels and everything else. But the same is not true of ocean shipping. It is just not done that way yet. In-transit visibility is something that we take for granted in the world. And in the maritime side, we do have in-transit visibility, but what we don't have is we don't have an assessment of when they're going to estimate their arrivals that are updated on a periodic basis. So, for instance, today in shipments around the Horn of Africa, we're seeing delays, losses, challenges of actually getting there, and the carriers are doing their best, but there's delays because we're not going through the Red Sea. And so it is becoming increasingly challenging to assess where your cargo is and when it will arrive. I will have to say, I was planning on tomorrow getting ready to have an installation of a air conditioning and a furnace unit for my upstairs house, and found out again that it was canceled today, the day before installation, because of shipping logistics issues. And so we just need to have better information throughout the system because it affects consumers and businesses through. I also want to look at the earliest receiving date at a terminal for exporters. We need to have dates that can be relied on, so people who show up at terminals with cargo know that their cargo will be capable of being loaded on a vessel for outbound service, and giving them a reasonable period of time to do that doesn't change. And if it does change, notification has to be provided as soon as reasonably feasible after that. Terminal access. We need to know when terminals are going to be open and closed to the trucking public. We need to know what the appointments process is. We need to know when there are changes in the status of terminal operations before drivers are dispatched. So we make recommendations for terminal access. Container availability in the terminal. We need to come up with a status requirement on when you can actually pick up your cargo, a standard on whether it's available, whether it can be picked up, instead of having multiple sources of information. I also believe that we have to have extension of these same requirements to cover intermodal rail transit and intermodal rail terminals if under a through bill of lading, which is the extent of the FMC's jurisdiction over this. So I believe that the same requirements need to be extended to cover those intermodal services. And there's got to be in my view, a lexicon that ties the practices and harmonizes the practices of shipping throughout the system of movement of our supply chain. So we recommend a number of definitional terms that would have import in terms of terms that govern the transactions. So, for instance, container availability is defined to be, at present, it is cargo that has been released by the ocean carrier. It's cargo that has been released by the marine terminal, so there's no legal obligations or anything impeding its ability to move, and it's physically capable of being moved. That is, the transporter can get access to the cargo that day, and there are no restrictions. So these are the sort of definitional terms and harmonization that we need. It's just amazing to me that we would lose so much money as an industry by not coming up with simple harmonization and simple requirements for the provision of certain information. We do make recommendations on sourcing of information to ensure that information is provided by the entity that is in possession of cargo, so that we don't run into this circumstance where a party is providing information about cargo that they know nothing about. We make recommendations, on what sort of information should be kept confidential, and what information should be made publicly accessible. And I do not want to create a recommendation that would enfranchise any particular type of technology or program. I believe this is information that can be made available through an API that is publicly accessible that all can use. And so those are some of the pillar areas that we're considering in terms of making recommendations on. In my view, certain requirements for the publication of information need to be made mandatory. because if that information does not change, it's still unreliable and it affects everyone. And then there's certain sorts of information related to the confidentiality of cargo that should remain in the purview of those parties that are part of the contract. So for the most part, information about terminal activities, the recommendation is that information remain confidential between the parties to the transaction. And I think that is reflective of an interest in protecting commercial activities of the companies engaged, and also to ensure that this information is not used adversely in the collective bargaining process. So anyways, staff is evaluating the two RFIs to provide assessments. I am finalizing the last set of questions, which will be on the specific areas identified in the report, and some of these macro issues that we need to assess. For instance, I do believe, given the security posture, that it may be necessary that ocean carriers be able to turn off information to protect their crew. And so these are the sort of questions we want to get answered by the public. And then after that, a final report. And I'd like to work with the NSAC as we go forward to see if we can go through some of those recommendations at a further date. And so hopefully that will work within your schedule and your plans. And with that, that's the update. That's where we are. And I'm happy to take any questions. Dylan, why don't you moderate and tell me who I need to answer to?
For members who are virtual, if you have a question, please use the raise hand feature and I'll sort of call on you. For members in person, please, I guess, just raise your hands and we'll also call on you. But I'll turn over to Mike to start for the chair.
No, real quick, I think just on the last set of information that you're talking about with data security and stuff like that, are you coordinating with other departments and federal departments and agencies? So I believe at our Q1 public meeting, somebody was there from the Department of State that's taking a look at it. So is it more on the data security side, more the commercial dynamics of it, or are you looking at it across federal departments and agencies that are also looking at data security?
So, as you know, Mike, the information flow is not controlled by the federal government right now. The only information that is provided is manifest data on the loading of cargo for importation or export, and a 96-hour notification to Coast Guard on vessels coming into the United States. So not a lot of information is provided other than essentially the peers data that we all get. So those terms are within the private sector, and that's the major challenge the federal government has. So we're continuing to work with the State Department, with DOT. I have regular meetings with DOT about flow and what they're doing. But I'm looking really at the quality of data underlying all of these programs. And so requirements for real-time information about shipping are not there right now. You are not getting information. In some cases you may, in some cases you may not. But for the most part, a lot of this information is just not being provided. And so I think we need to have standards that require real-time in-transit visibility for shipping. And so all of those other programs that are being worked on with the federal government will benefit from updating requirements that would mandate better information and better quality of information. So there's a continual dialogue on it, but I see the work that we're doing is more foundational in terms of upgrading the data itself and the information that the public should be capable of relying on.
Thank you.
Any questions from the members? I think Gabe, I think I see your hand.
Yeah, Commissioner, thank you for that update. Gabe Rodriguez here. This next series of questions, the response time to that and a final recommendation, do you see that happening this year? Or is that
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've got most of them done. I want to circulate them internally, review them. I'd like to get them out, early September, have a little time frame, and then be well into the process of assessing all of the information as it comes in. So yes, I think the timing would be. I'd like to have a report done by late October, final.
And then next steps after that, once that report is out, what's the next steps in carrying that out, and where can we help out?
I will have to talk further with the chairman, but I would envision that there will be some outreach on the final recommendation so people can get some comment on it to assess where everyone stands on it. And I wanted to make this very public as we go through these recommendations so people can look at them, assess them, see if they do something that was not intended. So I would think I know that there will be some public discourse. I would like to work with your subcommittee or with the NSAC itself as part of that process. I see this as a perfect opportunity to do something with the Shippers Advisory, the NSAC. And then I'll talk to the chairman and see what his thoughts are and what my thoughts are. As well, but I think we need to have some public commentary after a final report. The report itself is to reflect the comments that were made through the NTDI, the comments that were made through the RFI, and to harmonize our perspective of what those comments meant, and then to make a final product with recommendations on how to proceed.
Thank you, Tom. Commissioner, thank you so much for joining with us today. Just one question from my side. So as an end state, you talked about a set of recommendations and standards. Without putting the cart before the horse, do you see this? It's a two-part question. Do you see this as regulation? And if not, how do you think the FMC can get stakeholders to adopt the standards?
I'm open, to how we proceed. We did voluntary guidelines on detention and demurrage. What happened? Not much. So there are voluntary guidelines out there right now. The DC, I used most of the work product of the Digital Container Shipping Association, which is a group of ocean carriers who have evaluated what they should do. And that is a program that they've set up is very good. And in fact, we basically endorse it as a methodology to implement a track and trace methodology with harmonization of lexicon. And so I believe that we have to require that information, the quality of information that we want to be mandated. And if we can do it with a voluntary guideline and get that information, that's fine. But I believe that certain elements of what the recommendations are out there need to be required, because if you don't tell someone that you're going to require them to have estimated arrivals, they don't have to have them, and then that circumvents the intent for which we're working. So I think ultimately it'll probably be a combination of elements, but certain data elements at the very minimum need to be made required.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, a thought along those lines, Commissioner. What about the timing of this information? Because it's one thing to provide it, it's another thing to provide it timely so that it can be used.
So the recommendation, Deb, is that the information be made available on a real-time basis. So when the operational decision has been made, the companies that were looking at providing information would have to make that available as soon as safely feasible. So if they're in the midst of securing cargo because of a weather incident, I'm not going to hold them to a requirement environment, but it's supposed to be real-time information related to your schedule changes, to in-transit visibility, and to your estimated arrival. I know Gabe gave me a series of procedural data points in the transaction that should be covered. I would like it to be covered all the time. And so all of the recommendations made by the NSAC subcommittee on data are included in my recommendation, except for trucking in advance or trucking afterwards, which we just didn't feel that comfortable in making a recommendation to stay on. But from the point of scheduling services 3 months in advance of any voyage to ultimate delivery in the United States, I would like to have real-time information on the schedule, on the service itself with an estimated arrival, and with an estimated earliest receiving date, which would be provided to each terminal to be made available publicly as the set earliest receiving date for export cargo.
Thank you.
We might have time for one more question, and then I want to turn it over to Commissioner Bekich. So any other questions from the members, including online? All right, I don't see any other questions. So thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bekich, can you come on camera and unmute your mic?
Well, Dylan, it looks like I've hit the mic icon and the camera icon. So can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Please
Very
proceed.
Good, very good. And thank you for having me follow up behind my colleague, Commissioner Bensel, because I'm pretty sure he probably covered most everything in his speech. So, but I want to compliment NSAC and thank you for the invaluable service you've given to the FMC. Our last conversation that I had with you was in Long Beach, and I thought it was very timely and a good way to wrap up the TPN, and which didn't seem to take advantage of the expertise of your body there, and a little bit oblivious to it. And so I was glad there was a chance for a good dialogue. That was, I thought, very helpful. And your input on the various issues has helped the agency a great deal. You know, we're moving forward on our statutorily mandated rulemaking, and you know, I am a little surprised, and I knew what I was getting to about actually how many hoops there can be put in a way of something that should happen like D&D, and that the appeals and the denial, which I think is going on in part of the industry, not your part, but in the carriers, is I guess is predictable, but it's a little disappointing. I had hoped we'd be more rowing in the same direction, so to speak, by this point in time. But your input on that and every other thing that affects our agency is welcome in my office. And we like hearing from you. We like the dialogue. It's healthy, and you've taught me a lot, so I appreciate that. I'm also hoping as we move forward, we can figure out the way how a more painless way how you move forward and continue your membership on NSAC, and we have it viable, and that we don't see the wheels come off over unnecessary procedural issues, which I don't think that'll happen. I think we'll be able to proceed, but I know it's been in the back of the mind after all the work you've contributed and the good work. It's important, I think, to keep NSAC going, and you're a valuable tool, valuable resource. And you know, I don't know another group out there quite like you, so you'd be irreplaceable, I think. So that's one thought. this refusal to deal is, since D&E's kind of gone and coming and gone and gonna come back again, and we'll hopefully have all the bugs shaken out of that and all the legal reviews passed at some point in time. But as we moved into the new refusal to deal rules, our office is looking forward to your input on that. I imagine you have thoughts and tweaks and experiences that we would benefit from knowing. I know you had a lot of input into this whole thing. Our office was very much involved with this matter, and probably the most involved of all the parts of the OSTRA legislation. My office has been involved in the refusal to deal, and I got to tell you, it goes back to my time as a supercargo on ships and seeing shiploads leaving with 50% empty containers going across when they could be carrying cargo, and that was always frustrating. And repositioning, I understand, but it's not always in the national interest and or in the industry's interest. So Dylan and I could just keep on going on, and I'm a little sensitive to their time because they have a port tour and they just gotten updated on data. So I'm going to shut up now and let them ask questions if they like, or whatever else you'd like, Dylan.
Sure. There are certainly time for questions. Mike and Ken, I'll start with you guys. Commissioner Vekich.
Yeah, so Commissioner Vekich, I think to your point on kind of feedback with respect to refusal to deal, I think as we go later on in the agenda, we've got a working group on it that's going to try to, I guess, funnel some of the engagement with the shipper community to figure out if there's any lack of clarity on what is inside the rule today, and kind of come back to you on. Has anything come in so far that's like a high level issue that wasn't not necessarily contemplated when the public comments came in back in September of 22 and June of 23? Anything since then that's kind of we need to be thinking about?
Before Houthis, Red Sea, Panama, Baltimore, and other distractions and shiny objects that really affect the day-to-day function of the industry. Nothing that sticks out any more than anything else. But your working group's going to be valuable. I know you guys sought a general counsel opinion on the D&D stuff. I guess I would not be shocked if your working group had the same sort of thing that they asked our GC on refusal to deal. I'm kind of in the back of my mind. Plus, my counsel told me expect it. So, and Corey Sinkyu is my counsel, and he's online, but he's also the most experienced staff member, I think, of the legal staff on the FMC. So I won't be surprised. And it's great to flesh these questions out. It's great to get this no surprises, which I think that's the whole point of OSTRA. We don't want to be surprised. We want clarity and reality and facts, not fantasy or supposition or where's our cargo and why isn't our cargo where it's supposed to be. You guys are in the business of getting things where it needs to go, and we're in the business of regulating that makes happen, that happens. So, but Mike, I appreciate you reaching out and inviting me to speak to this group. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the members?
Hey, Dylan, I have a question.
Yeah, Morgan.
Hey, Commissioner, thanks for taking the time today. So we still see port authorities who have long-term dwell fees instituted in a schedule for BCOs. Any thoughts around that and how it potentially is duplicate demurrage on the steamship lines and the BCOs? And I know it's something we kind of chatted about in the past, but just curious about your thoughts.
Well, I haven't heard as much from the port authorities. And you've seen one port, So they are really a mixed bag. But I expect to have more conversations with them. I hear from some ports often, and but too many ports not at all. So I don't feel I've had enough input from them to really get a good grasp of their different approaches to dwell time, but I'm aware it's frustrating. I watch the numbers and our economists, point out the dwell time differences in the various ports. And, it's a concern. I guess we don't want to be back in another port congestion issue situation. And with volumes rising for a variety of reasons, I guess we're going to be having those conversations sooner than later, trying to make sure we have a feel for what's really happening with the dwell times.
Yeah, I appreciate
Best
that.
I can do. Okay. Hey, keep talking to me about this, because I need a constant flow of information on that issue, on dwell times and how you get along with the ports. And there are some ports are doing great, some ports don't do so great. But by God, I think I'm not quite to 40 ports yet, since in the last 2 years, but I'm trying to get around and see as many as possible. And I have a greater appreciation of the caliber of people we have in the industry at all levels, and it's pretty amazing. And it's also pretty amazing how small our world is.
Yeah, I think it's less about, we understand the need for it and it needs to happen. Whoever does incur it, they don't necessarily want to pay it twice, right? They just want to pay the one fee. So thank you for your comments. Appreciate them, Commissioner.
But we don't want to see anybody have to pay or it's not them. And the whole point of OSRA is to make sure the right people are paying and that people get paid and that people don't try to avoid paying their bills. I mean, that's the whole point. Let's bring more reliability and certainty to the supply chain transactions.
Mr. Benchel, I see your hand is raised. Did you mean to raise it?
Yeah, no, I wanted to talk about Morgan's question as well. I probably shouldn't cut into Max's time with my own commentary, but Commissioner Vekich and I are good friends. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
this is a big issue because you essentially have two parties charging the same fee, and we're going to have some challenges on that. I would note that this goes back in history. Ocean carriers used to own most of their own marine terminals, and so they would charge demurrage, which is for excessive storage on their terminal facilities. Now those same entities are still charging for storage at a terminal that they don't own or operate. So we're going to have some challenges, and I think I echo Commissioner Vekich's position. We need to hear more commentary on it. I would also note that the lexicon included in the recommendations would require only one demurrage charge in defining demurrage to be for storage in excess of any free time at a terminal, as opposed to allowing the carrier to charge separately. Would require it to be the same or consistent with the terminal charges. So this is a big issue, and it hasn't been resolved. So I also am with Commissioner Vekich. We probably need to hear more about it and in the future to resolve it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions from the members before we move on? All right. I don't see any. So with that, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is a brief update on the Data and Visibility Subcommittee. I think Gabe usually handles these.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dylan. So not much of an update, other as, for one of the last meetings, we had kind of put the committee into a sort of dormant state, although over the last couple of weeks, we've re-engaged with some conversations with different stakeholders within the industry. And, for some opening remarks, data seems to be that driving point. So we're going to continue to, flow through with some meetings with different stakeholders and see if we can't push the needle on creating better data visibility and transparency on that in some way, shape, or form. But with that, I know that the next agenda item are the two entities, amongst others, that we've spoken with. And so I'll turn it back over to you for that.
All right, thank you, Gabe. The first up, we have the Digital Container Shipping Association. I believe this is being presented by Mr. Dave Van Digela. I have your slides, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. But you can come on camera and unmute yourself, and we'll move forward.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to present at the National Shipper Advisory Meeting. My name is Dave Van Digelen, and I'm with the Digital Container Shipping Association. I'm here. I'm replacing today the seat of Dominic Willems, who is traveling during this meeting. And before I go to the update of vessel schedules, as a reminder, I provide a brief overview of the Digital Container Shipping Association, DCSA. So the next slide, please, Dylan. Right. So DCSA envisions a digital container shipping industry where ocean carrier customers can choose from seamless user-friendly services to achieve their business goals. We are a global non-profit association, and we are covering over 70% of global container transport. We demonstrate neutrality towards technology and solution providers, and we create freely and openly available standards. Our standards are created by collaborating with all stakeholders of container shipping and based on established international standards. Our standards include track and trace, portable optimizations, booking, the electronic bill of lading, and vessel schedules, which will be my primary focus. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a general update on DCSA. We improved the way standards and other supporting documentation to make it easy, accessible, and in different formats. We also have a freely available DCSA Academy now. Intense work has been ongoing in the last year to improve planning of standard implementation and have a dashboard now to track adoption per member. The lot is not fully ready for open publication, but we do show on our website an overview of which member has adopted which version of the standards. New beta versions were published in Q1 of our booking and electronic bill of lading standards, and the publication of the new versions has some delay, mostly due to new EU custom requirements. However, the previous versions are already being used and uptake has been doubled in the last year. It's also good to see the wider industry uptake and support by the public sector. We published a report on legal and regulatory barriers earlier this year, and this drew a lot of attention from governments around the globe. And in fact, Dominic Willems is currently at the APEC meetings where the US are heavily promoting the use of EBL. Last but not least is our track and trace standards has already become the standard for the industry. Since the beginning of this year, we are up from 100 million messages per month to 160 million per month. All members are on the same version now and provided to their customers. This is really a success, and the MTDI and Commissioner Bensel certainly contributed to that success. Next slide, please. So the commercial schedule standard, a quick recap of what our commercial standards are. This was the focus of our previous presentation at the NSEC, and our members received a letter of 44 US shipper organization requesting a swift implementation of the standards. Therefore, we want to put the main focus of our update on the commercial schedules. So this commercial schedule actually consists of 3 different standards, each with their own view. So we have the point-to-point routing that provides the estimate end-to-end route. We have a port schedule, which provides a set of all vessels arriving and departing from a specific port with the corresponding estimated timestamps. And we have a vessel schedule that provides the timetable of estimated departure and arrival for each port call on the rotation of the vessel. And important to state is that the commercial schedule will be available to the customers of shipping lines and the service providers and their platforms. Next slide, please. So where are we on the vessel schedule progress? I need to explain that there are two different schedule standards. One is the operational, which is the data exchanged in the operational environment between the carriers and the marine terminal operators. Commercial is the data exchange between the carriers and their customers. Both require different data and are used for different purposes, but they go hand in hand. In fact, the operational schedules are an important prerequisite for the proper functioning of the commercial schedules. We are well on track on the implementation of the operational vessel schedule, and all members and other parties will be ready soon. So back to the commercial schedules. We published our beta versions for review in Q1 this year. As mentioned, following that the CEOs of our members receive a letter of 44 US ship organization requesting a swift adoption. And this put quite some pressure on us, not just to do it quick, but more important, to get it right. We did some testing with members, with their customers and their service providers. And we will publish the final version of the schedule end of September this year. The testing and feedback we received led to some delays in the finalization of the commercial schedules. However, it also led to important improvements that should be specifically relevant to the NSEC. The main new feature is the inclusion of the cutoff dates, including the ERD. One on the right side on the slide, you can see the full list of the cutoff dates, which includes documentation, VGM, and what we refer to as the EFC, the earliest full container delivery date, also known to you as the ERD. This is really a result of the effort of shippers and our members picking up on that need. But it remains nonetheless very important that you, the NSEC, and individual customers of shipping lines continue reactions to ensure it works in the best way possible for all stakeholders involved. And going to the next slide, which is the finalization. And on that note, I would like to thank you again for your attention, and always please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you. I think we have time for some questions. Would you like to from the members? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
All right. I'll turn it over to the members on questions regarding for the DCSA.
Dylan, this is Gabe. Dave, thank you for that presentation. You've mentioned twice in there an industry letter that supported. Can you elaborate on that a little bit as to how that supported your efforts and what the outcome of that has been?
Sorry, I missed part of the first sentence.
You mentioned an industry support letter a couple of times in your message. What was the outcome of that, and how did that support the efforts that you were doing?
Well, I think it showed the need for the interest to work on the standardization of this and the publication on a harmonized manner. And this is now leading to the fact that the first members already started working on the different schedule standards we have set. And soon, like I just mentioned, Q4, we will, by September, we will publish the final version. And then it's up to members and the audience to start exploring how that can benefit your situation.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I see.
Hey, Dave, just real quick, I think you said too, I think when you were meeting with the subcommittee that you have some members that have got like high transparency and high engagement, but when you talked about the standards being more publicly available, is there any visibility in terms of across your members where people are on commercial schedules, even though it's all supposed to be delivered in September, kind of progress along the way or anything like that? I think it just from engaging with your members effectively, I think it would be helpful to understand what information is and isn't available to have one-on-one conversation with carriers about this is a priority with between BCOs and freight intermediaries with the ocean carriers. So what is there to kind of help continue to support the ongoing dialogue?
Right. Well, on our website, we openly publish an overview of which member is using what standard in the current situation. And when it comes to upcoming standards, we're not yet to provide that publicly. But if you want to know, then you can reach out to your specific shipping lines and ask about it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, welcome.
Okay, one more question, if I could, this is Gabe again.
Yeah.
With the glossary of terms that you have, demurrage, detention, inland points, and per diem, different terminology that's day to day within the operations of the industry. Those don't seem to be mentioned. Is there any work by the DSA that will be addressing those? Visibility of that?
I think what we are doing is we are harmonizing data standards. The further details of that is not an area which DCSA is involved in. This is, of course, a commercial area where DCSA can be any part of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the members? All right. Seeing none, I think we will move on to the next presenter. Thank you, Mr. Van Dibbela. Next up, we have Mr. Michael Darden with ASTM.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to be able to come and present for ASTM F49. I was asked specifically to be able to discuss a work item that I think fits into the discussions that have taken place so far today. Thank you for pulling up the slides, Dylan. ASTM is a standard development organization. We are also set up as a nonprofit organization. However, our members are made up of the community, of everybody in the community. And we don't look to replicate or duplicate existing standards that are in place. Instead, our work is really focused on being able to fill in the gaps that are existent between the focus areas of each committee. I am part of F49, which is the Digital Information in the Supply Chain Subcommittee. I am the chairperson for the Terminology Subcommittee. And Dylan, if you can advance to the next slide, back in April of last year, when Commissioner Bensel released the MTDI-MTDS report, the Appendix 1.7 of that report really took great strides to be able to help the industry unify on the terms that are going to be utilized for regulation, and was clear in articulating that these terms and their definition were foundational for the work that the FMC was doing, including that with the National Shippers Advisory Committee. And there were additional elements from the data subcommittee that were also represented as recommendations. But within ASTM, we have a method that is required for standards development. And if you can advance to the next slide, Dylan. Each standard really goes through a process of where there is some new need that is identified. And this slide is an ASTM slide that walks through the rigor of involving everyone in the community to be able to produce the highest quality work product. And standards development in the ASTM world is a very consensus-based and open and inclusive environment for allowing participation so that the best work product can be produced. Next slide. So with this and the reading of the report from Commissioner Bensel for section 1.7, we were like, so what are the glossaries that are currently in the industry that stakeholders may have been using in the past? And how many terms are in them? And just to be able to try to grasp an understanding of the body of work that was produced by the FMC and Commissioner Bensel and his team, we evaluated 57 different glossaries to say this is something that is in this industry, has been generated mostly by, if you needed a glossary, you would start writing a glossary. And we ended up with a whole bunch of proprietary glossaries from different parties that make it so that we have numerous definitions for the same terms. And the curiosity that we had as a need was, if Commissioner Bensel and the FMC is going to be rulemaking using these terms, it would probably make sense to be able to do an analysis of, are these terms understood in standards development organization dictionaries as they exist today? And recognizing that the Commission's regulatory authority is that of the maritime industry, from the origin port through to the destination and the multimodal or intermodal that it goes through before it gets to its final destination here in the domestic U.S. We asked the ASTM committee executive to be able to review this work and authorize us to be able to create a work item. Next slide, please. So this work item was really divided into, there's 3 steps here. Of the first thing we want to be able to do is recognize what are the 200 terms and get a familiarity with them. And then to be able to survey the other supply chain glossaries and choose 5 to 7 standards development organization created glossaries that we could utilize for the initial comparison. And the executive committee identified that we wanted to focus initially on those glossaries that had been created by standards development organizations. And we put in a range of 5 to 7 glossaries that we were looking to do. We have completed the 5, had a preliminary conversation with Commissioner Bensel where he was helpful in clarifying the specific area that the MTDI lexicon was intended to be able to focus on, and that he was explicitly not looking to extend those terms to pre-shipping events and to invoicing or post-reconciliation events. So we've focused our efforts truly on the area that is within the 200 terms that Commissioner Bensel has defined. And then when we had those first 7 completed, we prepared a preliminary report that identified what the results of those first comparisons were. And before we move on to the next slide, you can just kind of glance at phase 2 was truly intended to be able to get additional glossaries compared and then to produce a more robust report that helps to be able to harmonize these terms that have been adopted for decades in some cases by other industry standard development organizations that are not necessarily aligned with what the current released set of terminology is. So we anticipate generating a report by the end of the year. We have to get it in by the end of Q3 for a report by the end of the year to be published with ASTM. But if you'll flip to the next page, we put this together in such a way that it was basically self-service, that this could build a collaborative of, there's still 50 glossaries that are in the industry that haven't had a comparison done, that have not harmonized and aligned. And we figured there's something so non-threatening around just terminology that this would be a place of agreement. This would be the place of alignment that is related to saying, the master data source that is being represented from a regulatory perspective is from Commissioner Bensel and the FMC, and these other glossaries that currently don't have those terms should consider these regulatory terms being an appendage to their existing glossary, not the other way around. Not from the perspective of, let's see what everybody else's dictionary is and let's see if we can change Commissioner Bensel and the FMC's, but truly to be able to recognize the comparison from the FMC to these other glossaries, and then to be able to create a standard of work that can be done by other connected organizations in the supply chain that we believe are standards development organizations, including nonprofit organizations that are developing standards. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the surprising part here, is that when we looked at the comparison, the designation that we came up with was one of three statuses. It was either going to be an exact match, or it was going to have a match of the term, but a different definition, or it was going to be missing the term altogether. And you'll notice that in the MTDI DCSA, the third column over is where the highest percentage of match is of the exact matches, because that was the source, or much of the source, of where the terminology came from for the MTDS lexicon. However, it was really surprising that the other CSCMPs and ASCMs and GS1s and MIRAD and UNC, their glossaries don't include these terms. And it's not like it's just missing a couple of them, it's missing the vast majority of them. And that for us to be able to get to a level of interconnectivity, I don't need to be duplicating efforts of what GS1 standards are or what DCSA standards are, but there's bridges of some data that needs to be exchanged between the parties, and we have to have common understanding of what those terms are. So we took our preliminary results here, knowing that there was another 50 of these to be done. And if you'll advance to the next slide, Dylan, you'll see that we sent out a 3-page summary report to 200 supply chain experts that are in our directory. At least one that's on this call here. I think it was to 2 or 3 that were on this call here, but we got back 43 responses that agreed with the premise of the fact that this work item was something that needed to be harmonized. And 31 of those 43 sent back personal endorsements. And we didn't expect those sort of results. We were looking for a couple of endorsers that we could put on the delivered final product, but the type of endorsement that we got was quite staggering. Everybody realizes that if we don't agree on terms, we really can't get APIs to work together. We can write as many standards as we want to, but if the word container availability has 14 different meanings throughout the supply chain, depending on who we're talking to, it's not going to become standardized to be able to say, send me your container availability. So just as an example, I'm going to ask Dylan to flip to this next page, because there's 5 sample endorsements that we put on here that are from UNCFAC, that are from Supply Chain Ventures and CSCMP and Georgia Tech and Venture 53. And this is just a sample, but I'll leave it up for a few minutes and welcome any comments or questions on this work and using terminology and alignment of terminology as a means for us being able to have some co-opetition or cooperation while we're aligning on standards and the adoption of standards.
Mike, are you trying to?
No, I have somebody trying to eat in my office, but I will ask a question. So, Michael, I think so what's left inside of your timeline to kind of realize what you were talking about as you went on some of the prior slides in terms of the work, and for members of the shipping community that may not be as familiar with ASTM, is there any calling, a kind of not necessarily call to action, but kind of what do you need from the broader shipper community in this work?
Yep. So that's really what this turned into, was when we saw the number of reactions from the community. We were like, so we got to ask people if they're willing to help. Are they willing to be able to put some time in to be able to do this, or in review? There's different phases, but as I described in the ASTM process, it's very much of a whittling towards a consensus process. So we need participation. We need voices. We need people at the table that are saying, wait a minute, that doesn't cover this, so that when we show Commissioner Bensel, this is the definition that you adopted, these are other definitions in the field that actually are also used, and they should be in a discussion area so that people that are used to that term know that that is now this term from a regulatory perspective. But we need more voices for that to happen.
And is there anything you're doing specifically to kind of parse the work out across the 200 terms, or kind of how are you looking at that in terms of getting engaged feedback, to kind of continue to support the work?
So one of the beautiful parts of an ASTM process and why I engaged in the terminology committee is there is a form and style guide that is produced by ASTM that gives the definition of how to produce definitions. And when I first read it, I was a little taken aback by it because the first sentence of it says that you can use one sentence to be able to describe a term. You can use semicolons and commas and such to be able to explain it as big as needed. But then there's a supplemental part of every description that allows you to be able to have a discussion area. And the discussion area can go on for as long as possible. What I've done to be able to try to separate the work is I've brought in some interns that are from university programs, which ASTM is very supportive of being able to bring early supply chain folks in to be able to use the kind of the algorithmic formula of how to be able to write a definition for these terms. And then we have discussion groups and work sessions that go through what needs to be included in the discussion. So there's a starting point of what the definition is. That's open for discussion, open for beating it up and changing the words, but there's also some rules around how to be able to generate those terms and their discussions so that they can be consumed equally by all stakeholders.
Questions, other members? Gabe, I think is here.
Thank you. Michael, something I've discussed with a few industry stakeholders, how do you see, once you've got a finalized list of defined and standardized terms, how do you see that, you kind of mentioned now, applying it to the MTDI or other regulation, how do you see that rolling out as far as adoption in the industry? Is that something that carriers, terminals, DCOs, NVOs would all have to adopt to have that common standardization? How does that work?
So voluntary standards, that's how that would work, right? I mean, from a voluntary standards, people would have to say, yeah, I want to be able to voluntarily do that. But in this case, Commissioner Bensel, adopted, I think it was 48% of the terms that were in the DCSA glossary of terms, but not all of them were adopted as written. So some of them were edited to be able to be precisely what Commissioner Bensel wanted them to be able to represent. But there's also some of those terms that came from other sources that the format for that standard is such that there were 4 sentences and then an example. And without it being read the same way, without the word cargo and goods having the meanings that are defined inside of them because of the sources of where they came from, they produce erroneous outcomes that are not intended, but by just the mere fact that we amalgamated these terms from 5 different sources and tried to come up with the starting list, it's the starting list. And Commissioner Bensel, reconfirmed that to me, that he was open to being able to hear feedback on it, but not just, random feedback from somebody but more so from a structured approach of how to be able to gather that best information and share it. So I think our committees, our task groups, our working sessions that are available for feedback is what will refine this to be a presentation to Commissioner Bensel, not for us to be able to publish separately and say, we rewrote Commissioner Bensel's terms. That's not the case. The thing that Commissioner Bensel shared with us is that he didn't want to lose any content, any context from the existing definitions. But if we had additional things that would help the user to be able to understand that would be valuable, and he would take that into consideration. And that's all we're looking to be able to do, is to put context and some rigor around how these terms are defined so that they can be referenced in regulation and be understood by industry as being the same definition.
Is that something like I go online, Merriam-Webster, and I say, I'm going to use this definition, under ASTM standards? Or when you mentioned voluntary, is that voluntary free, voluntary for pay? How does that scenario work out?
So for these definitions and terms, they're really, we're not writing a standard. We're just applying a best practice of a form and a style. And we could do a publication on it. We could do a co-publication. We could ask them. It was a work item that was because there was a new need that was understood from Commissioner Bensel's report of the fact that the lexicon was a big issue. And we were like, how big of an issue is it? Let's take a look at it. And as soon as we did, and we brought it to the executive committee and showed them that there's 57 different glossaries that are in the logistics space, they were like, well, there's work to be done here, but I don't know what the final outcome is going to be. And I said, the ideal final outcome is collaboration. Let's get it so that we can all agree on terms. I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful if we just all agreed on what the terms were and nobody had an axe to grind in it? We just had a need to be able to identify it. ASTM doesn't need to make money on a terminology standard. This would be a publication that would be available based off of the rights that we got from FMC and the rights that are granted from other glossaries, which, by the way, that was part of our selection criteria, was to be able to evaluate the licensing and the public availability of this information from each of these sources. Which, as a secondary note, we realized each of these standard bodies really need to be able to have a little bit of an effort to fine tune the way that they're presenting this information. Is it free? Does it align with other things? What's connected to it? Because right now it's a mess. I mean, it's just everybody's built it in their own way. They try to hide certain things and try to be able to make other things available. And it would be a nightmare to be able to navigate your supply chain with who's got which vendors and which APIs, and we just, especially if you don't have the same terms.
Michael, Morgan every once in a while accuses me of not being smarter than a fifth grader. Not, I'm joking.
She said sixth grade.
So ideally, this is a free dictionary of agreed upon terms at the end of the day.
It's not my dictionary, but yes, it would be published either by FMC or by multiple parties. Ultimately, I would love to be able to see an appendix that gets sent to every one of the existing known glossaries that say this appendix, this supplement is going to be used by the FMC in rulemaking and should be part of your supply chain and logistics glossary. Period.
Thank you.
I've got to chip in because so I'm doing some auditing right now for a lawsuit that's to do with merged detention per diem. And the problem I have, and we still have this in the MTDI, is that there's a conflation between detention and per diem.
Yes.
There is no breakout. And I don't care how we get there, but we have to have clarity on that, because one of these days I'm going to go into court and I think the forwarder, the NVO, has put everything under detention. And how do I break that apart and make that clear in a court of law? It's going to be a bear.
Yes.
And for BCOs in general, the NVOs come to them and say, oh, here's your detention bill. Well, wait a second. What's this for? Is it in terminal or is it out of terminal? So I have a real problem with, and I always have had a problem with the abbreviations, the lexicon, if you will, of terms in our industry, because it's for the big guys, we can deal with it. But for the other 195,000 importers,
yep,
there needs to be consistency and ease of understanding.
Well,
I'd like to clarify, I want it to be consistent with big guys too.
Yeah, consistent across the board. So no matter what size your company is, you're always dealing with the exact same definition of a term.
so what's very interesting at the moment, there is a parallel piece of work that's happening in our federal government where similar timeline to the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, there was the passage of the Financial Data Transparency Act. And the Financial Data Transparency Act is a new joint data standards group that has been called for by the Department of Treasury, Federal Reserve System, Federal Department of Insurance Corporation, National Credit Union Administration, Consumer Financial Protection, Federal Housing, Commodity Futures Trading, Securities and Exchange Commission, Department of Treasury, that have all said we have to get the same data in financial transactions, and we can't kill the small to mid-sized businesses by asking each of them to format this same data in different ways to each of the different organizations and agencies that they have to work for. So this legislation is currently out for 60-day comment, but I think it parallels with us, Ocean Shipping Reform Act being 3 months behind what they're looking to do. And if you looked at kind of what Commissioner Benson is looking to do from a regulatory perspective and the regulations that have been issued, I I think we have multiple government agencies that are also involved in understanding the terminology that's being used, and we shouldn't burden small to mid-sized enterprises to be able to try to comply with numerous different requirements. We should standardize what the data elements are that are forward-facing and inward-facing, and make it publicly available so that the parties can engage in transactions in a harmonized manner. But I think we got a roadmap. It's an interesting one. It's 77 pages, but I would suggest if you're going to read it, page 15 to 38 are kind of the key pages of the document. It literally talks about the fact that you have to know who you're doing business with to do digital commerce. And they're endorsing an identifier for digital commerce for financial transactions.
We'll see your hand go up.
Michael, Ken O'Brien here.
Hey, Ken.
Question for you. At this stage in your journey, how do you see the work you're doing compared to DCSA, and are you complementing each other, competing with each other, or just mutually exclusive still?
So DCSA's focus is on being able to have vessels operate as efficiently as possible with ports. And their focus on that is because that's who they're owned by. And it's rightful for them to be able to be the subject matter experts in the space of vessel operations. And ASTM has zero objective to be able to write anything that's counter or conflicting with any adoptable standard. But standards go through different phases. Sometimes they get introduced from industry and then they go into a standards body, and then the standards body gives them some rigor and makes it a little harder, and then regulators point to that standard. It's a roadmap. It doesn't happen overnight. In this case, because of the fact that there's so few number of vessel operators, and there was a nonprofit formed to be able to help those companies to be able to interoperate when they need to be able to exchange cargo from similar ports, they are a viable participant. I would just suggest that, in the ASTM world, we would welcome all of the other stakeholders to be a part of those standards developed so that they could communicate what their pain or pleasure from each of those new standards being deployed can be addressed in an open forum, can be negotiated, and can be incorporated into the final work product so that everybody's voice has been heard. In the case of DCSA, I think their focus is on vessel operations, and they connect to terminals. But there's a lot of shippers and a lot of providers and freight forwarders and BCOs that work with different combinations, and having a layer for them to have a voice in that standards development is the philosophy of ASTM, to be inclusive. We would welcome DCSA with open arms to collaborate on future standards to be developed. I think, we're looking for gaps. They're trying to be able to cover the big tranches. And I applaud the work that they've done. I've read the work that they've done. I recommend the work that they've done. It has a lot of legacy behind it. It's come from decades of work on standards development.
Thanks very much.
Any other questions?
I had a quick
sorry.
question. Probably can't see you way back here. Hi, Michael. It's Allison Levitt.
Hi,
I
Allison.
just wanted to kind of get a feedback on how you feel. If you can get to this final glossary, linking it or working with the concept of Incoterms, where everyone in international trade accepts Incoterms, and yes, it's been updated and it's a Bible for say trade terms. And, I would see this glossary as a very similar thing if everyone could adopt it, that it is published, it is what we all refer to, no questions asked. I guess
Updated every 10 years, just like Incoterms, right? Just where we agree that we're going to give it an update in 10 years from now, accept the feedback.
So, do you see a parallel there, or is there just too many discrepancies that we are struggling to get there?
So I would say that 10 years ago, I think we could have gotten there from a collaborative perspective. I think today we're probably at the point that we need a legislative push. We have some trading partners that we have worked with previously that we don't have trading relationships with now, or limited trading relationships. We have a very dynamic environment that didn't exist back 10 years ago. You had a vessel line and you worked with them, and it wasn't really a big spot environment. And we weren't doing any place near the volumes that we're doing now, and don't have any place near the number of exceptions that take place off of a 20,000 TEU vessel. I mean, I think the best way for this to go forward is to be able to put the first stake in the ground of we can all agree on this. And then let's take some bites at what else can we agree on? Where else can we align on what data needs to be shared from a external perspective, and what data do we not want to, by no means at all, ever to make it into a public environment. But you have to have a forum for that to happen that can listen to everybody that's involved. And, you know, frankly, the vessel owner is thinking about the manifest of how many containers that comes on the ship, and how many go off at each stop, and how much fuel, and who my staff is. And their concerns are not the same as the shipper that's got 12 containers that are on that ship.
Any other questions from the members? Or
I have one more point to be able to make, which is the first two work items that we created when we made this F49 group are related directly to Commissioner Bensel in this report. So I can tell you that my copy of this report is dog-eared and highlighted and written on. I've read it probably 50 or 75 times. Yako is kind of the leader of the 04 group, and he has taken on work item 87207, which is related to container availability. And if DCSA was looking for a place to be able to align with us, or like we are looking for a place to align with them, that term container availability has been mapped to the DCSA graphics that show all of the different touch points of each of their different flows. And we can show the 14 places where the term container availability is used by different stakeholders. And it would be a great place for us to be able to have an initial place to align.
all right, thank you, Mr. Jordan. All right, I think at this point, we will come back to the members. I know they have their subcommittees that they would like to update on. First, we have the fees and surcharges subcommittee.
Hey, Dylan, Bob Connor from Mallory. I'm pinch hitting for Rich Rochu's on holiday these last weeks or two. The fees and surcharges committee has been pretty busy. I think one of the more influential committees within NSAC, notably, has submitted a lot of comments regarding the detention and demurrage final ruling that was generated by the commission, as well as submitted a fair amount of commentary regarding the final ruling on refusal of the deal. But I will say that at this point, our committee has nothing to table new formally.
Thank you. Any comments, feedback from members? If not, then the chassis subcommittee.
Thank you, Dylan. So on behalf of the chassis committee, we do not have any further actions or items to add today. And so I will pass it back to Dylan.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And then we come up to the port best practices group.
Hello, everyone. This is one of the newly formed subcommittees. We actually only had our second meeting today. Real good discussions that we're starting, and very much aligned with all of the discussions we've had here today. For sure connected to data and visibility. We're going to add in a little bit of an operational approach along with that so that everything is aligned. One of our first actions that we decided today will be to start talking to some ports, probably a couple on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, to get some feedback on these types of visibilities related to early return date, empty return containers, and cargo availability. So more to come in the next meetings, but it's a very energetic group. We had, actually, that's why we were late today. We couldn't stop talking to make it to lunch. So, looking forward to it in the weeks to come. Dylan, back to you.
Any questions, comments from the members regarding that? If not, then we'll turn it to the refusal to deal working group.
I'll go ahead and cover that, Dylan. So, refusal to deal was one of the incremental groups that's come out of NSAC. It's not going to be a full-blown subcommittees because we were waiting on the rule. But I think to the comments made by Commissioner Vekich, no different than when D&D came out, kind of what's unclear, what may be missing. And so I wanted to touch base on a couple things today just to kind of make sure for those who are not as clear about refusal to deal. The original notice of proposed rulemaking was in September of 22. They put out a supplemental notice in June of 23, and then the final rule came out July of this year. The three most common identified issues within the public comments were insufficient vessel space and capacity allocation. That was the major issue. Poor communication and notification practices, right? So that's vessel schedule changes, insufficient notice on blank sailings, and just basically comments saying poor overall notification practices on changes to existing vessel services calling the United States. And then really one that was much more of an exporter perspective, repeated rolling of export bookings and cancellations with no sufficient notice. And that's not only been talked about within NSAC, but in AgTC and other export-heavy shipper organizations across the country. I think the key thing to note, if we think about back to the original notice of proposed rulemaking in September of 22, what was going on in this country, what you could read about in the trade press, the public comments are much more driven by export concerns at the time. Not that the importers weren't facing things, but empties were being evacuated at an increasing rate relative to import growth to get that high revenue box back. And so there was a lot of consternation on the exporting community out of the United States. That being said, we're hearing since the rules come out that there's more examples of importer concern about refusal to deal that wasn't there, right? With this, the implications and impacts from the Red Sea, how the carriers are looking at this, that, the small, medium-sized shipper and more so freight intermediaries that are not BCOs are having what they believe are situations that could be referred to as refusal to deal. I think what ultimately is going to need to be done is that, importers and BCOs that are working on the import side need to review the rule. And coming back to both FMC, to Commissioner Vekich and Corey Sinku, and or the working group here, or direct comments into the FMC in terms of trying to seek clarity inside the rule. I'm not going to go through everything, but there's a couple of key areas that people need to be clear about that are inside the rule. One is documentation. The carriers are supposed to have a documented export policy. It doesn't have the importer, but for us on the export side, what is it? And we shippers need to understand what that is. Both sides need to negotiate in good faith. There may be legitimate transportation factors why a shipper cannot get what they want, and the carrier needs to, reasonable and what they call legitimate transportation factors when making that decision on why they can't comply with something that could be perceived as refusal to deal when in fact it may not be. Evaluation is going to take place on a case-by-case basis. When it does happen and the why of it, the ocean carrier is going to need to justify their decision. Burden of proof shifts over to the carrier, but the shipper can file complaints under section 41104A, section 10. Unreasonable conduct examples, rebookings, cancellations without notice. A lot of these things affect both of us, but it depends on which side of the world we're talking about. But there's specific examples of that in the rule itself. Definitions. What is a deal versus a negotiation, right? Do you have something that's been concluded, or are you in the process of still talking about that? Needs to be clear. Going back to the old, probably at least a decade, service contract concerns. Do you have enforceable language as shippers inside of your agreement or not, right? And from the carrier side, maintaining that within service contract language. This goes back in some senses to the FMC's guidance to at least the exporting community on ocean service contract shipping guidelines. Not anything mandatory, but things that in the sophisticated, complex, and dynamic world within we live in, and the complexity of those commercial relationships, things that BCOs need to think about if they want to have an enforceable service contract, which again was something cited often in the trade presses that these agreements are not enforceable. Impact on refusal to the shipper documenting the consequence of such refusal, carrier needing to take that into account, and then really, again, getting in a broad definition of refusal. So there's a lot inside the rule. I think, again, what the working group's is gonna focus in on is getting feedback from the industry, and as Commissioner Vekich said, trying to funnel some of these things directly to General Counsel if there is lack of clarity within the rule itself and with the agency on terms of process. Commissioner Bensel kind of walked through some of that at an AgTC meeting about 3 or 4 weeks ago now, but I think the rule is there. How, if a shipper is facing an issue that they perceive as a refusal to deal, what is the first step? That is not necessarily clear at this point in time. These things can be made clear, but I think we've got to hear from the shipper community on having looked through the rule. What do you need? What do you need? What do you need to know that's not clear? What's inside what's not in the rule that needs to be in the rule, or what's unclear in the rule? And that'll be the focus of the working group going forward. I'll turn it over to any questions on any of that. I'm not saying I'm the master of refusal to deal, but we're trying to put some framework around it to facilitate and support the shipper community in understanding it, so that if something's coming up, there's clarity and a clear process upon which they can try to address it. I guess back to you, Dylan.
All right, if no comments or questions from the members, then at this point, we'll open it up to public comment. As a reminder, the public is always welcome to comment to the NSAC via email at nsac@fmc.gov, and the commission do monitor that inbox and forward comments to the NSAC leadership as they arrive. If you would like to comment, I'll start with the folks who have attended in person in the boardroom. Please provide your name and affiliation before beginning your comments. Would any of the in-person attendees like to make a comment today?
No.
All right, then I'll bring it to the virtual. If you are attending virtually and would like to make a comment to the committee, please sort of raise your hand and I'll call on you. But again, please provide your name and affiliation before beginning your comment. Anyone on the virtual side? Right. I don't see any hands raised. So Mike, I will turn it back to you for the other committee business.
Got it. A couple of quick things to just make everybody aware of. I think to Commissioner Bensel's point, Dylan is working to try to identify best dates for where the commissioners will be available in November, December, to figure out and finalize the date for the Q4 public meeting, which will be in DC. I think to the point Commissioner Bensel also made, coordinating with Gabe and Alexis on if the work is done with respect to MTDI, coordination with the data subcommittee, and how does that be part of the public meeting in Q4. So those are two things that are on the horizon that we are aware. There's been questions about more so the Q4 public meeting for people's planning purposes and travel. And we'll try to get that squared away in short order here so that we have some clear dates that we can then look at people's availability and try to nail it down, given the fact that end of November is also a U.S. holiday. As we look to the Q4 meeting, I think we'll start to be thinking about planning for 2025, the where and what across the 4 quarterly meetings. I think also the big concern or the big open question has been, first, this is the end of the first term as sitting inside the legislatively impelled Federal Advisory Committee that we are. The agency is still working on that, so I'm not going to press Dylan for any updated comments yet, other than I know you're still working it in terms of what the plan is going to be for the existing members. we'll leave it at that for now, but it is being, I can assure you, based on comments from Dylan to both Ken and I, that there's a plan in place to try to maintain continuity of this work going into the next term. And as soon as they can reveal it, they will. And hopefully that'll be before the Q4 meeting. Those are the two things I wanted to make sure got across to the rest of the members. Is there anything from the membership that you guys want to raise before we conclude?
Yeah, Michael, I just wanted to ask again, do we have any insight on TPM, on us meeting at TPM? Peter and Chris are asking if we're going to do that so they can start advertising it.
I can take that, Steve. Yes, we are aware that there is an invite out there, so we need to work it on our end, and there will be an answer at some point. I cannot say, I don't know when, but there will be an answer. And to Mike's point on the membership, I know that's, all of you all are on terms that expire at the end of this year. We do hope we should have an update for you very soon on what, how we sort of expect to handle sort of the end of the term. And it will be sort of based on sort of what some of the options that Congress provided for us in the statute establishing the committee. But we should have an answer for you from the commission very shortly.
If I could just follow up on the comment on TPM, JOC is painfully aware of how they lacked promoting the meeting, and they want to get in front of it this year. They actually want to start promoting it this September. So the sooner we know, the better for attendance, and so we can manage that.
Yep, Steve, definitely hear you on that. And I think even with the lack of visibility to it, it was still the best attended meeting we've had in the 3 years we've been together, right? In terms of public engagement. So I think their commitment to try to make it much more robust and an active part of their program and support dialogue between the committee members and the broader shipper community and stakeholders involved, I think is to be commended for S&P Global and GLC specifically for it. So hopefully this will move forward post the approval we got for this year for the Q1 meeting. To that point, I think as we look to 25, we've moved around the country to try to engage directly with shipper communities to greater and lesser success, depending on the location and time of the year. As far as scheduling places that have not yet been covered is something to think about for the Q4 meeting publicly across the membership, to not travel for travel's sake, but try to be in places where we can engage. Clearly, we're in DC for part of the schedule, but we've been in the field every year to try to connect with shippers across the country, being in 3 different locations so far this year, in the PNW in Southern California and in the Northeast. 3 of the largest gateways in the country for container freight movement. So if members feel strongly about it or believe strongly about a particular location that has not yet been visited in the last 2 years, let's bring it into the dialogue for the Q4 public meeting to try to make sure that we've got a clear roadmap for 25, regardless of what the transition plan is going to be, because I think the work continues and we want to make sure that we're going to where we need to be, but also at the same time being respectful and spending time with the commissioners, the chairman, and our designated federal officers in DC as well. Anything else from anybody? Now's the time. Happy we got a couple minutes yet. Happy to cover it if we need to.
Sorry, Brian Kota from IMC, part of the public. I missed the public commentary period. My apologies. Just one quick question. Is there any plans on looking into Pier Pass and the clean truck fee on the West Coast any longer? Those fees are just going up again now, and wanted to see if that was part of the general discussion that this group is looking at.
I'll take this one, Mike. No, sorry, I didn't catch your name, but no, the group has not talked about that. But it's something they can certainly, obviously, I guess, falls within their purview. But no, it has not been in their discussions.
Yeah, I think to the point though, from a we've got to know. I mean, fees and surcharges would be the place for that work to be looked at potentially, and so or port best practices because it is very specific to a particular part of the country. So I think I will leave it to the people in the physical room who are both at the chairs and vice chairs of those two committees to decide amongst themselves where it should be. But we hear what you're saying. I think this is, whether you're an importer or exporter, it's definitely something that's been talked about for a long period of time. And so post maybe this meeting, provide some specific feedback to the group here, and we'll figure out, who's taking it up and what's the appropriate pathway forward.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Ben, any closing comments?
So not too much. I think, Brian, your last question speaks to a lot of what we just talked about. Is in a symbiotic relationship, are both parties working towards mutual beneficial things? PurePass is clearly not. There's money is spent, we get nothing for it, and the other party is fine with that because they get the money.
Yeah, in fact, there are surcharges now for 3 of the West Coast terminals, or the LA Long Beach terminals, that we're paying a PurePass to, but now actually putting surcharges on our good customers. It takes 3-4 hours to get them.
I think it's a great point. I think when you talk about the data piece, which I really enjoyed the conversation, listening to both TCSA and ASTM, again, I think it gets to this core of, is it okay to deliberate or to recommend if there's no way to either regulate or have the other party kind of listen? And so I think we're stuck in this funny place of, we can identify problems to the commission, but what can the commission do to solve them? And I think that's just the reality that we have to face, is that some of these things, it takes the other party, it's not the commission, it's the free market, but it does take the other side to come to the table and have a discussion with shippers, with truckers, and want to fix it. And if they don't, I guess regulation is a solution, not one that I recommend necessarily, but many of what we identified today seems to be opportunities that require a conversation in good faith. Refusal to deal, absolutely. Retaliation, which the commissioners asked us to follow up. We couldn't because no one would talk, because we're not necessarily as an industry in a true two-way communication, right? We're not having a conversation. We're having a one-way conversation. And so I think for all of us, we should probably think about what can be fixed with recommendation and what needs to be fixed with regulation. And since we're not having regulation in general, we should probably work on the stuff we can fix with conversation.
So I will add that the FMC does have jurisdiction over the West Coast Marine Terminal Operators Association, or WCMTOA, and I know Dylan looks like he's fixing to interject. They are the governing body for that, and PurePass is part of WCMTOA. They have the ability to potentially review that agreement per recent publications. So I would just add that out there. That I think
just to that point, then it's something that comes out of the work of a subcommittee, and be ready for Q4, right? I think, look, it's definitely, to Ken's point, we can continue to work these things. There are two pieces to it, right? There is we are counseling and supporting the work of the agency, which is a regulator. And at the same time, as participants in the system, we are trying in our individual organizations to make progress, both at the firm level and at the system level. And so they're not incompatible goals, right? At the end of the day, you'd prefer an industry-based solution, and that is the guidance that we've gotten from some of the commissioners through the years as well, right? That it's not everything does not need to go to regulation or technical enhancements to OSRA 22, right? And just make people do it. At the same time, I think my view of this is what we're talking about is the forces of status quo are extremely strong, right? And at the same time, from the U.S. exporter perspective and my specific vertical, we are in a fight for our lives against other origins to the same customers. And as the largest leading economy in the world, we are underperforming relative to some other parts of the world. And it is unimaginable, given the capacity of this country, the investment in infrastructure, that we are facing that situation, and yet we are, for the issues that we've been working for 3 years, that pre-existed NSAC and before that. And the way forward is to try to figure out some of these things that Ken is talking about. There are many ways forward commercially. The dialogue around this stuff continues with the regulatory agency, because there are key things that we need somebody to be able to look at. The question is, where the commission will land on some of these issues, but we don't set them aside just because even on some of the things that they put out, they're continuing to be challenged by the carriers and others in terms of whether they got jurisdiction or specific issues. We just have to continue to work the priorities that we've identified and continue to hear from the shipper constituents that we're responsible to represent supporting the agency. But I hear what you guys are saying, and again, from the U.S. exporter perspective, it is no less challenging, but it is a U.S. competitive matter. And so we've got to continue to focus on some of these key areas. And again, data underpins everything. And so I think the work of Gabe and Alexis in engaging both DCSA and ASTM to try to understand subsets of the total of what's going on under Commissioner Bensel's MTDI overall overarching umbrella of these last 3 years is try to bring some nuance in the complexity and where the focus is and where there's some potential to make some gain, right? And so I think stay the course on some of these areas. This is, you can't even use the word to describe this. This is not an ultra marathon. This is beyond that. But if we're not committed to trying to make improvements in the system level, every one of our individual organizations or the member organizations that we represent cannot make the necessary progress that's feasible in the largest economy in the world. And post the pandemic, I've said it in every meeting that we've had, the U.S. should be leading the way on this stuff. And you, as members supporting the agency, are part of the dialogue that is helping catalyze some of these conversations. As has been mentioned by both Commissioner Vekich and Bensel, what you've put forward has been incorporated in the deliberations, no different than the other public comments. And so you've had a valuable role to play. And I'm going to close it with thank you for your ongoing engagement and commitment to this work, because as you all know, it's not been easy. And the deliverables, if we think about it from a private sector perspective, are not exactly clear for the time invested. But if not us, then who, as we continue to move forward on this stuff. So I want to pass along that personal appreciation to all of you.
All right, I think that concludes all the discussions of today's agenda. So those are your conclusive remarks, right, Mike?
Yep, that was a random walk through everything.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining. We will see you at the next one. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dylan. Do we have a date for that?
Thanks, everyone.
No, we don't.
Thank you, everyone.
I was just double checking. There was a lot of words and all sorts.